Today's guest is a very good friend of mine, and if he isn't on his boat, you can find him on stage entertaining thousands of people, playing some of the most iconic songs in music history. Today's guest is none other than Russell Hastings. How are you, mate?
I'm good, Ben. Good to be here, mate. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm glad you're here as well, because I think this is a long time coming. I think we've known each other for a long time, but I think it's time for you to tell your story now, mate, and let people know.
Yeah, I've told bits and pieces over the years. You know, I don't think there's anything nothing to jump out of the closet on anybody. But yeah, I mean, where do you want me to start? At the beginning, as they say.
I often thought about that, but I've done so much with you where we've talked about from the beginning.
Yeah.
I just want to enjoy just listening to your talk, because you've got so many stories of, listen, you were with two of my heroes for a long, long time in From the Jam, you know, with Bruce and God rest his soul, Rick. I could sit here and listen to your stories for hours upon hours, mate. But I just want you to say whatever you want. Well, first of all, before we do that, mate, I want to, as I said to you, thank you very much for coming down. I hope the travel was all right.
It was all right, yeah.
Brilliant, mate. And you are a busy man now, as I said. You know, when you're not on your boat, you're on the stage performing.
Or I'm playing golf.
Oh, you're playing golf. You're still doing a bit of that?
Oh, yeah. I'm more addicted than I ever was on golf. Yeah, I love it. It's great for me. Good for my head.
I played golf, but the best two balls I ever hit was when I stepped on a rake. So it's still one of the best, isn't it, mate?
Great, isn't it?
Let's. I tell you what. Let's just go straight into it. You know, you worked, as I mentioned, with two music icons. You know, and two people who people absolutely loved. Rick and Bruce. How was that for you, mate?
Amazing. 20 odd wonderful years. That's what it was. 20 odd wonderful years. You know, when I look about it, I look back and I think about it, and I reflect upon it. It was every boy's dream. Let's be honest about it. It was every guy's dream, particularly me. Well, no, not particularly me, but I was a musician from a very, very young age, and you know, I got switched on to the Jam at a very young age. You know, I was about 11 or 12. Come around 1977. I think I was 12. Yeah. So to become not only working partners with the boys, but to become great friends with them was a great experience. One of wonderful life's 6 greatest experiences for me, anyway. And it was great fun. It was as you would imagine, I think is what you say. But it was, you know, I was honoured to be picked, really. Not that I was picked because it wasn't like that. They didn't go out looking for somebody, you know, to replace Paul. That wasn't ever it just organically grew. And so my story with that starts really, let's sort of, because that's what people are interested in. I was hanging out around that time around Fisher Lane Farm Studios, which is Mike Rutherford's and Genesis' studios, and I was good friends with some of their production team, and I was doing some recordings down there, and that's where, you know, that was probably in about 2001. I'd already met Rick at a radio station about 1999. And he was presenting some prizes, and we went for coffee afterwards, and we got on really well, and we swapped numbers and stuff like that, and we found we had a lot in common, and I was really pleased about that he was, you know, the guy that you all expect him to be, that everybody looked upon stage and thought Rick was Rick, and he really was like that guy. And so in that time also I was recording some demos out of Fisher Lane Farm Studios in downtime when Rutherford wasn't doing any Mike and the Mechanics stuff. And so I was really good friends with a guy called Dale, who was Mike's PA. And then one day Dale said to me, Russ, I'm going round Ringo's, do you want to come? And I went, fucking right, I'll have some of that. So I went, yeah, let's count me in. So we jumped in this transit van, we bomb over to Ringo Starr's house, like you do, and then we go on to the estate, and I knew where he lived, actually, not far from where Bruce lives now. And we go on to the estate, and we go into the studio, and met the engineer there, because they were having some works done on the studio, and I walk in, and then I'm looking at all around the place, and I spot the Ludwig kit in the corner, you know, the Beatles kit, thinking, fuck, you know. And around the back of it had a little cushion that he used to lean against the wall, and it had his name written in leather in Ringo in red and black. And so with that, all of a sudden, Ringo turns up in the studio. Comes in, how you doing, boys? You know, chatting away, and it was a great experience to sort of all of a sudden this Beatles walked in. You know, the Beatle walks in, and so Dale had asked me to give him a hand. Some stuff had to be moved out of the studio because they were doing some work in there because they worked together anyway, and then they had to move this Hammond organ out. And so in those days, there was those old flatbed B&Q trolleys that used to put bags of cement on and sand on. So they said, look, Dale said, look, give us a hand with this, Russ, and we'll chuck it on here. I went, well, I'm not here to lug around, you know, but I thought I'd chip in. So I chucked this keyboard, this Hammond organ, and put it on top of the flatbed trolley. This is exactly as it was. And then Ringo said, oh, boys, you will be careful with that, won't you? And he went, yeah, sure. And it was just about on either side, you know. And he went, because John gave me that. And it was like, I didn't say John who, you know.
Oh, you just know.
We just know. It was one of them. I didn't think it was Johnny's neighbour or nothing. But and then, you know, I had an association with Ringo, really. There was some stuff I was thinking of using the studio there. And then Mike Rutherford asked me to do some demos for a Mechanics album. And that sort of propelled me forward with a bit of confidence with my vocals and stuff, because he'd heard some vocals that I was doing, and he asked me to do some. So, and then he wanted me to do something for the one of the new albums that was coming out. And within that time frame, Rick had phoned me up and said, "Look, you know, do you want to come up for dinner up to my house?" And so I went up to Rick's, and Rick sort of like said, put it to me. He said, "Look, Russ, you know jam songs as well as anybody." He said, "Look, I'm thinking about getting back into playing." And I went, "Yeah, okay, that sounds great." I said, "Where do I come into that?" He said, "Well, look, if I rent a studio, will you come up and play me in?" So I said, "Yeah, cool." So I went into the studio, and that's what we did. We jumped in the car that day, actually, went down to the studio, Water Rat Studios in Woking, and booked the studio for the following week. And the following week, a good friend of mine, very good friend, David Moore, who used to play in bands with me many years ago, I said, "Look, Dave, I need somebody to play bass. Come up." We got Rick set up for, you know, getting back into playing. And he said, "Well, all right, I'll jump in on bass." So we got up there and we played So Sad About Us, which was a neutral song. I thought, let's not do a jam song straight away. Let's do So Sad About Us, a Who song. And then we were straight in from the top, 1, 2, 3, da da na na, you know. And the hairs on the back of my neck went up. You know, it was fucking amazing. And then we played, you know, several songs. I can't remember what we played. We probably played Thick as Thieves, Tube Station, something like that on the first day. And then Rick finished up with the kit, which was a borrowed kit from the studio, by the way, because Rick didn't have a kit at the time. And then when we finished, he went, "Well, look, I love that." He said, "Can we do that again next week?" So I said, "Yeah, let's do it again." So we did that for like 9 months. That's what we did. Week in, week out, just rehearsed a full set. And then we had a band called The Gift. Me and Rick named it The Gift. And then we went out on the road playing jam songs for the next year or so. And within that time frame, Rick and myself and Dave were playing Belfast, actually. A town you know, but a city you know very well. Then we played that, and then we got a phone call, and it was Bruce. Bruce phoned Rick up and said, "Look, we're on the same bill tomorrow night. Why don't I jump up? Would you be up for it?" And so Rick said to me, "Is that all right?" And I went, "Well, yeah, let's do it." And he went, "Okay, yeah, that's cool." So we got to the gig the next night, which was in Guildford. And then we met up in soundcheck, great, had a few words, and then Bruce came and played. He said, "Well, look, I'll play Tube Station and Smithers Jones." So I just sort of was concentrating on what was going on, really. It was a bit too much for me to handle, but and for everybody, to be honest, for everybody in the room. And there was only about 7 or 8 people in the first part of the sound check, and then what they did, they let a load of people in that got wind of it, and yeah, it just went from there. Really, that was the incarnation of From the Jam, you know.
And when that happened, when you got Bruce, you got Rick, you're all on the same stage. Did you ever look over and just go,
Yeah.
fuck me?
I did.
This is incredible.
Yeah, I did.
Because you're the same as me. As we could talk about the Jam for hours upon hours. One of my favourite ever bands. You know, the reason I ended up enjoying the mob soul culture and all that because of Paul Weller. One of the most stylish men on the planet. Yeah. You know, the Jam, what that band means to me, I don't think other people would really understand.
Sure.
But to have been there on the same stage with them two icons, I just probably would have froze.
Well, you'd think you would, but then you've got to... I mean, when I looked around, there was certainly... Rick was not relaxed, and Bruce wasn't relaxed. I know Bruce was shitting himself as well. So I thought, well, they're all shitting themselves, including me. Let's just keep it all together and let's get through to the back of it. So that's what we did. And then when we came out that night, Dave stepped aside, gave Bruce his bass, and then Bruce played Smithers, and we played Tube Station, and that was it. And then Bruce phoned me up the next day, and he said, "Look, I fucking loved it out there last." So he said, "I see what you and Rick have been doing," and he liked it because I wasn't trying to be Paul. I think otherwise he wouldn't have had fuck all to do with it, and I like that, And when he phoned me up, I remember he phoned me up, and I was sort of full of admiration and pride of the night before he went, and he let me sort of give it a couple of minutes of saying how good it was. He went, right, that's enough of that. Let's now move on. He said, how are we going to move this forward? And I said, well, I know a few people. So it was my job. So the short story is that I found a promoter who was in Los Angeles from it was from the agency group, which was one of the biggest agents in the world. And the fella, Keith Naisbitt, came from he was from Newcastle originally, but he'd moved out to LA. So it was an LA company that took us on. And then they put a small tour together here, a club date tour, which sold out in 4 days. And then we did that tour, which was fantastic. And then we did, while that tour was going on, they put a big tour on for the end of the year, which was the big sort of Brighton centres, academies and stuff like that.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Let's go back, just want to go back to that time when you got Rick behind you and Bruce walks on the stage as well. Do you remember the crowd reaction?
Yeah, they were crying. People were crying. Grown men crying.
And you played a big part in that.
Electric.
You must have felt really proud of yourself.
I did. I felt immensely proud. In fact, I've got something that's signed at home to my kids, and they were only young at the time. And I'll tell you what I do remember, this is honesty, when I'd finished it, I drove back on my own that night from Guildford, and I arrived back at Bognor Beach, right by the bandstand, and it was about 2:00 in the morning, and it was a full moon night, and I walked out, and the sea was sort of half in and out, and I gave myself 10 minutes thanking the universe for bringing it all together. That's what happened. That's the honest truth. And I had 10 minutes, and then I thought, because I was taught that, anything great that happens, give it some thanks, and then move forward. And that's what I did. And then I drove home, and I woke up the next day, and that's when the journey started, really. And
thanking the universe, is that something that you learned to do in sobriety as well, if you don't mind me saying?
Exactly. No, I don't mind you saying at all. It's been my way of life for the last 29 years. I've been sober and clean, and even saying that number myself sounds amazing.
Madness.
It does, completely madness. I thought if you were 29 days, you were a hero.
That's the way I used to look at it.
Fucking, it was mental, wasn't it? Well, yeah, as you know.
I mean, I remember I used to call you and say, I need advice. I'm on my arse here. When I mean on my arse, I don't mean financially and stuff like that. I mean like
emotionally.
I was an emotional wreck. I didn't know what I was doing, because I'd do a big gig or something, and then after it, my way of sort of saying, fuck, look what I've just done here, would be to go out and celebrate and carry on celebrating, because the way I used to see it is, I can't replace that buzz. I've just walked out in front of Kentish Town Forum, with Pete Doherty, right? When I'm off that stage, what do I do to keep that buzz going? oh, let's get some gear and a couple of beers and keep the party going. I remember in the Uber all the way home, I was in the back and I had my own party going on in the back, right? Looking back on it now, it's easy to say, oh, it's stupid, and it was part of the journey, I like to say. But it was like, some people look at that and go, oh, well, it's part of rock and roll, it's this and that. And I think some of the biggest names in music and rock and roll are all sober now.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? And I think sobriety, to me, I certainly don't think I would have done half of what I've done now if I didn't clean my way up. And as I say to you before, you were part of that, because you helped me and you gave me the guidance that I needed. No one is going to go out there and physically do it for you. You need to put the graft in and you need to change your own ways.
Sure.
But what you did was give me something like guidelines that I could go along with. And listening to your own story as well helped me out a lot.
Yeah, I think that it's all about, lead by example, really. But not that I wanted to lead anything, but, people have done it for me. And, I remember this was always a great thing. In the year 1999 into 2000, into the millennium, the first person I shook hands with was Clapton. And that was like, he was standing next to me. I won't mention where he was or anything, but he was standing next to me and I shook his hand. And I thought, fucking hell, that's, and he was sober. He's been sober a long time, he sort of got 10 years on me. And maybe it was 13 or something. And I just thought, because I used to think, how can I do this? Because I was always born a drink short. That's how I felt in my life. I always thought I was born a drink short. If I had a drink, it sort of made me like normal, like other people thought. That's what I thought. And then I got into rock and roll really young, sort of 14 and 15 and playing in the clubs, and my experience of, like buying some blues in a toilet in Ilford Palais in 1979. I remember that buzz taking the blues and what it did to me. It lit me up, It made me feel whole, really, and it changed the way I felt. And that's what all of the drinking and the drug taking did for me. And that's what it was until it stopped working for me. And it just stopped. Not overnight, because I kept fucking chasing it, thinking, well, it might not have stopped, I'll keep having another go. And, it's no secret, psychiatric units were quite familiar, as hotels are familiar to me today. So I'd gone off my trolley. So there was no real, I had to either turn left or right, and I happened to turn right. That's what it was. There was not really any left being dead or right survival and a great life, and that's what happened to me.
And I think by the grace of God, both of us chose the right path, and that's why we're here today.
We're here today
and
because
we've got a smile. Exactly
yeah,
that.
Nice one. I like
and
that.
And it is beautiful, and I thank you for touching up on that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up.
Not a problem. Let's go back to the music though, because recently what you've been doing on your social media is telling some beautiful, beautiful stories of your times with Rick and Bruce. And I would like to just hear a story myself from a time.
Yeah, I've got loads really, and it's sort of all dependent upon. I mean, we've just so many because it was such a happy time, and it was, with the Rick stories. I mean, the classic one that jumps to mind for us is when we were touring Australia. And none of us had been there, really. And Rick and Bruce had never been there, and we were touring Australia, and we were there, and we'd been out for the day around Sydney, and it was fucking really hot out there. So we said, what should we do? So we'll go to Manly Beach. Somebody said go to Manly Beach. So we get on the Sydney ferry, we go out to Manly, which is a lovely beach, and then we did Bondi as well. Did Bondi Beach, and we all turn up there, and then our crew are all there in fucking Union Jack shirts and shorts, and they don't look too good. And then we're down at Bondi. Rick suffered from the sun. He fucking hated the sun, really, because he'd lost his hair, and he was constantly putting cream on his head and trying to keep out of the sun. But his head had gone bright red that day, and then we all had to go. Dave, who'd been out in the sun all day as well, he had this fucking bright red shirt on, and he had this. He actually came out the dressing room. We were playing Sydney that night, and we're on in like a few minutes. And he's walked out the dressing room, and his fucking nose is as red as you can see. Looked like a baboon. And we just all burst out laughing, and we had to delay going on stage because we were just laughing and cracked up so much. That's just one of the funny experiences. And Bruce used to repeat that to me over the years, you know, it'd been quite sort of funny, you know, whenever he'd see something, that he'd mention those. He had loads of stories. Bruce was very, very funny in those early days, you know. He used to like a drink as well, you know, but not like you and me did, you know. He was a normal drinker, I'd say, you know. Rick's not so much of a drinker, but, you know, they both had great stories, and not about the old days, but we've had a lot of stories between us, you know, and as they say on the road, what happens on the road stays on the road, and it always has been like that, you know. But some things can be told. You know, we've had many times when we're travelling around, and I'd be looking across. I remember flying into LA with Bruce, and I had Hugh Cornwall behind me, because Hugh was opening for us from the Stranglers. So I had Hugh behind me, Bruce was sitting next to me, and Rick was over in the aisle there. And I remember I'm looking out the window like a little boy at school, you know, thinking, fucking hell, this is incredible. As we're going over Los Angeles, and Bruce leans into me as the seat, you know, leans in and goes, see, I told you, stick with me, I'll take you all around the world, son. And it was one of those moments that I thought, yeah, you know,
surreal.
It was surreal for me, and it was surreal for Bruce as well, because he was grateful because the wheels were put back on the bus in order for them to be Bruce and Rick again. Do you know what I mean? Because I was under no illusion at all that I was the key member here, because I fucking wasn't. You know, and I don't say that to try and be humble. I say that for the factual reason. It was about Rick and Bruce in those early days, and it was, and it was a joy for me to be part of that. And it enabled me to go under the wire for when I first come out on stage, you know, because they weren't really looking at who was singing right now. They were looking at Bruce and Rick, and you know, and then after about 4 or 5 songs, they thought, right, who's this fucking fella up here then? And then their attention came to me. So it allowed me to settle in, you know. Of course. Feel a bit more comfortable on stage. And then I could start being me, you know, which was, I've always only ever been me, you know. I've never tried to be Paul up there. I mean, people have said, oh, your voice sounds the same as Paul's. I'm like, and Paul said that to me, you know, we were in the studio one day, and he said, well, I thought you sound like Bruce. And Steve Brooks said, I thought you sound like Bruce. And I thought, well, thank fuck for that, you know, because that was good coming from them, because, you know, it was, I don't know, we come from the same area. And I guess, you know, if you come from Scotland or you come from Newcastle, we're going to sound similar, me and Paul, you know.
You're lucky you didn't sound like Barry Gibb, I suppose.
Exactly, I've said this all the time.
You said it to me before.
I've said it, I could have come out and sound like Barry Gibb or Robin Gibb even, you know, and you'd have all thrown fucking tomatoes at me. So I also learned over the years that you can't please everybody, and that I'm not in it to win a popularity competition. I'm just not. Because, and what I mean by that is that people, you know, social media is a great thing, but social media also brings out some strange folk, as we all know, because it's what we do. We live a life, you know, sort of semele in the public eye, and you've got to take the crackpots with the, and I guess people with their opinions, because, listen, I've said this from day one, I don't think I'd have come and seen me in the band, you know, with Rick and Bruce. I'd have thought, fucking, you know, I'd struggled with it for a few years, like a lot of people did. You know, and I'll never forget the night that Nikki Weller came to the Cavern, and we were there, and Nikki turned up before at the hotel. She came to see us at the hotel, and she pulled me aside when we got back to the hotel. She went, Russ, I really get it now. I actually get it, what you're talking about. She said, I didn't know what people were talking about before, because it was just, you know, we were just playing jam songs, and if that made a load of people happy, then great. That's it. No one was trying to be anybody else. No one was trying to fool anybody. And as Rick and Bruce said, I'm going to touch on this because the name From the Jam, right, came about because we were in Los Angeles, and we were doing an interview there. And then the interviewer said, in a similar environment to this, you know, how come it's From the Jam and not the Jam? They said, well, we're not the Jam. They said, we used to be in the Jam, but it's music from the Jam. That's what it is. And they went, oh, okay, yeah, great, we get it. So it's always been about music from the Jam. That's it. It wasn't a statement as to who was in the band. Do you see what I'm saying? It was music from the Jam. So
I've always said that straight along. You know, I got it from day one when I heard it. You know, when you got people saying, especially after Bruce parted ways on good terms, did his own thing, which we will touch up on.
Yeah.
But people were like, but no one from the Jam is in it anymore. And I was like, that's not the reason it's called that.
Yeah.
They're playing Jam songs. Where are the Jam songs from? From the Jam. And I got it straight away. And I would have this conversation with people and they're like, yeah, but no one's... And I'm like, mate, you just don't get it, do you? And people will get it. And then you got people who just don't want to get it.
Yeah, but that's okay. And then they don't need to come. And Rick used to say this quite publicly, you know. He used to say... And this was from Rick and Bruce. They said, if you don't like it, don't fucking come. That's what they said. And I thought, I like that, because that's coming
straight
from
to
them.
the point.
Straight to the point. So if you don't like it, you don't need to come. There you go. And leave it to people that do want to come and enjoy it. And it's not about... Talk about... the word nostalgia is sort of... I don't know, I guess if it's nostalgia, if it's... yeah, great. But I'm also playing some songs in there that I wrote with Bruce over the last 3 albums that I played with Paul... that Paul played with on some of those. Paul played on a track called Window Shopping, and I wrote that song back in 2011, and Paul played piano and guitar on that, and Bruce obviously on bass, and Mark Brzezicki on drums, and that got selected for the Grand Tour's final episode, which I was really pleased about, you know, from Andy Willman, who's a big fan, who's the producer of the show and the business partners with Jeremy Clarkson. He was a big fan, and he said, look, I'd love to use it. So I was honoured, because George Harrison, one of my favourite men in the world, also put a song on there, My Sweet Lord, coming to the end of it. And I was just absolutely blown away that I could be on the same
What a tune that
billing.
is as well. That's lovely though, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've got a big association with George Harrison over the years, and through many, many reasons. But I'll tell you one quick story about that. I was in Barbados in 1999, and my dad was ill, and he was diagnosed with lung cancer. And my father-in-law, bless him, he came down the garden and gave me a book to have a look at. It was the Beatles anthology. And so I was sitting there looking at this anthology in this particular residence on Gibbs Beach in Barbados. And as I looked at the book, and you can look at it if you've got the book, there's a postcard in there. It says, to George and Patty, on your congratulations on your honeymoon. And the address, well, it said love from Paul, Ringo and John. And the address was where I was sitting. How about that? Yeah, man. Yeah.
Sometimes things are just meant to be, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, I just took that, and so the year later, when my dad passed away in the May, I went there the following year, and I took his ashes out there, and I put his ashes in the sea there. And then since then, well, I was there last year, and I since then put the ashes of my father-in-law in the sea out there as well. So there's this bay on Gibbs Beach, which is one of the most famous quiet beaches, and I got married there as well in that house.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I got married there. Yeah.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, pleased about that.
Let's I want to talk about when I want to go back to Rick for a bit, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I remember he was the only one I never met. I met Paul, as everyone knows, many a times.
Yeah.
You know, and he's been a big supporter of my
Paul's
work.
a lovely fella, you know.
He's
I just
an
wanted to
absolute
quickly
gentleman.
touch on that. You know, my experiences with Paul. People always said over the years, you know, what's Paul thing? You know, what's that? Well, it's always been delightful to me, and I always take people as I see them. And Paul was nothing but a genuinely lovely fella, and a great musician to play with, very great at what he does, and very much a human being. And he sees things as they are, and this great big magical, mystical cloud. Of course it does. Paul walks in before he does, if you know what I mean. You know what I'm saying there. Paul's persona walks into the room before he does. But I've always enjoyed Paul's company, and he's been very gracious and very lovely, and I just thought I'd put that bit in.
Oh, whenever I see him, whether it be in the studio or backstage at his shows or wherever, I have to, try and convince myself he's your friend now. It isn't Paul Weller, it's your friend. Because I look and go, that's someone who I've idolised all my life. And my journey in magic and whatever has brought me into these amazing things. And he's been a massive supporter of my work. And you know, to have your childhood hero, because he is. Everyone thinks for me it's Noel and Liam, which it isn't. I love Noel and Liam. I met Liam a few times, but Paul's always been my childhood hero, and to be able to show my work to him and for him to support it and love it it's an absolute blessing, and it just proves what a wonderful thing life can be, you know, to have moments like that. But as I said, you know, Paul was someone I met many a times, still do see him. Bruce, met him a few times, obviously when you were performing. I think the first time I actually met you both was, let me get this right, it was a gig in Portsmouth, actually. Was it
Brighton?
Tonic? No, we did a festival, and I think it was Tonic 2 or something, and Terry Hall was DJing. God bless him.
Yeah, sort of.
I do remember. And you performed.
Yeah.
And I come and met you both, and it was a brief one because everyone was. It got a little bit too on top backstage because there was people in there who they weren't artists or something. I think they just rushed in.
Sure.
And I briefly met you both, but me and you stayed in contact. Obviously saw you again, then we saw you at Brighton. I come into your dressing room absolute steaming.
Yeah, you were certainly on one.
Yeah, it certainly was, mate. And I would have kicked me how you were so polite. I would have just not even let me in, mate. Fucking, I've seen pictures of me. Derek D'Souza took photos. Yeah, he's got a photo of me falling back on one of the cases backstage. Yeah, thank fuck he's never put that out. Yeah. But the opportunity, Rick was doing something in a shop called, let me get this right. In fact, I think the shop was called Tonic, and it's in. It was about an hour and 45 minutes away from my mum's house, and I flew over from Belfast because it was on my birthday with my wife and my little boy Lonnie. And they said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I know where I'm going. We're going in. I'm taking the car out. We're going for a drive." Of course, we're stuck on the motorway. We're doing it, and they're going like, "We've been in the car for near enough, like an hour and a half." I'm like, "It's going to be worth it. Going to be worth it." Pulled up to this mod shop, and there's scooters all outside. There's a big crowd, and I didn't tell them because if I said I want to meet one of my heroes, they'd go, "Fuck you know, turn it in. We'll stay at home." Yeah. Met there, and do you know what? Whether it was because that was the last piece of the puzzle in terms of meeting my heroes, I don't know, but I didn't say much, mate. And people were like, "Did you show him a trick? Did you do?" And I was like, I had cards on me. I wanted to show him a trick. He had so much time for everyone, and he was speaking to me, and I had all modcons. I had all modcons, and it was signed by Paul. And I remember passing it to him, and he said, "Oh, look, well, you've got the main one there, haven't you?" And I was just, yeah. Could you sign there? I didn't know what to say. And I remember I got some of his drumsticks as well and a book, and he signed the book, and I gave that to my little boy. But he was an absolute gentleman, and he was everything that I expected, because you see pictures of him and, you know, it's always like the quiet one in the back. And he was just lovely. And it was a moment that I will treasure that moment, because it's never going to happen again. Mm-hmm. And I will treasure that forever. And so much so that obviously when that, of course, these days, as we mentioned on social media, plays a big part. Now, I remember it like it was yesterday, right? I was in the bath and I got all these messages, and then you go on to like Twitter, and there was a lot of rumours going around. And in my head, I was like, I really hope this isn't true. I really, really hope this isn't true. And then, of course, something come out from the family, if I remember rightly, confirming the dreaded news. And do you know what, Russell? It was, I can't explain it to people. Mm-hmm. I think you will know exactly what I mean. Mm-hmm. It felt like a family member. Yep. It generally did. Yeah. And I froze, and I couldn't speak. Like I was heartbroken, mate. I remember that day, as I said, and I don't know, like people will probably be watching this and won't get it and go, "What you on about? You only met him once," and that. But for me, it's what he gave to me,
Sure.
as well as the other two members of the Jam,
yeah.
you know. And I mean, let's have it right. You were on the road still though when that happened, weren't you?
I was actually in Thailand when I got the news, and I got the news about 6 or 7 hours before it broke in the UK. And see what had happened in the August of 24. Rick phoned me up and said, "Look, Russ," he said, "How do you fancy a bit of lunch together?" He said, "It's lunch on me. Come up to mine and we'll go out and we'll have lunch together." And that's what we did. Went out and had lunch, and told me what he was doing. Told him what we were doing. I was telling him what was going on with the band and stuff like that. And he was in a really good place, and he looked really well. And I actually said to him, "Fucking hell, Rick," I said, "What's your secret?" I said, "Well, you know, maybe it's because you don't tour anymore, you know, like we do, and you look better than any of us." And he laughed. He said, "Oh, you know, I've got another book coming out. I'm doing my book tours, and I've got another grandchild on the way." And it was really lovely. I've got to be honest, it was really lovely to see him. And we put a few old ghosts to rest. We spoke about a few things that had happened a few years previous to that, and it was just lovely to be with him, because he was quite a wise old owl in a lot of ways, you know. And he switched me on to some classical music, Rick did. And I've never stopped listening to that stuff, you know. And he switched me right onto it, and it was really good. Because he said it was all right, you know, in them early days, in the early 2000s, you know, to listen to it, I sort of got into it. But he went off. I dropped him off at his house, and then that was the last time I saw him. And then that was and he phoned me a couple of days later, because he knew Bruce had been in hospital. And he said, "Look, Russ, I want to go and see Bruce." I went, "Do you?" You know, because they hadn't seen each other for, 15 years. And he said, "Yeah, have you got his address?" So I gave him his address, and he went round to see Bruce. And then on Rick's birthday, in December, I sent him a usual message, "Happy birthday, Rick. You know, none of us are getting any younger," that sort of thing. Because I looked back at it a few months ago, and there was no reply. And I thought, well, that's odd. You know, he always replies. And then a little while later, anyway, they investigated with a few other people, and everybody was couple of people said to me, have you spoken to Rick lately? Because they've gone dead quiet. And I said, no, I haven't heard nothing. And then I was in Thailand. Like I said, I was on holiday, visiting my son out there. And then I got a message that said to me, you know, told me what had happened. And so I instantly phoned Bruce up. I phoned Bruce first, and that was weird, telling Bruce that, you know, Rick had died. And then this was, and then apparently, you know, all the phones were ringing with each other. There was a statement that was going to be made, and it was just all so shocking, really, because he looked so alive when I saw him. And then, you know, and he really did look alive. And I'm not just saying that. He was well. And everybody's experience of Rick has always been one of great experience. Everybody's always spoken about that. And, you know, because he was the people's man of the people, really. He always spoke for the underdog as well. And I was really upset about it, because not that we saw tons of each other in the latter years, but I was so pleased that he phoned me and said, "Let's go for lunch," because we had a great time together. It was almost like, you know, I thought to myself, did he know? You know, did he know? But I don't think he did at that stage. And he sadly passed away quite quickly with it. And he was a lovely man, you know, and he was the person that said, don't confuse the man with the artist. Which I love that, you know.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, he said, don't confuse the man with the artist. And it sort of allowed me to meet people of great fame and not relate them to what they do, you know, where I know them from. So it enabled me to... He also said a great one to me. You know, he said, Russell, he said, just remember, he said, an apple tastes as good to a pauper as it does to a king. And I remember at the time going, what do you mean by that then? You know, fucking idiot. And of course, the more I reflected on it, I thought, yeah, that was amazing. You know, it's exactly. just got to think about it. But he was a lovely guy. Played some amazing part of musically and was part of, like we all talk about the Beatles and how the magic came together with the four of them. Well, that was what it was like for the Jam. It came together at the right time. The stars aligned, boom, and that was it.
And what a drummer as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
amazing.
some of the most iconic drum beats in some of the songs, I mean, you can listen to it and go, that's Rick.
Yeah, absolutely.
How hard was it for you guys, though, to get on the stage after the news of,
I remember thinking, well, we can't go out on this tour and do nothing about it. So I thought to myself, I know, let's put up let's get a huge backdrop made. And I remember having it made and delivered, and it was big. Anybody saw that tour can remember how big it was. And then it was a big black and white shot, and we had to select the right one. We couldn't just. We had to go with the one that, and Derek D'Souza's shot, actually, it was Derek's, because we couldn't go back and use something because of copyright. And, between the time limits that we had, to get the thing made. So it was made, and then it was put up, and then me and Bruce came out into the venue and stood there. And both me and Bruce were quite teary about it, to be honest. We're quite emotional about it. We did feel that way. Bruce he went, oh, I feel quite emotional about all this. And I said, totally. And so when we were on stage every night, coming out, it was incredible because people would look up at that image. And I thought it was really fitting, really. And it was something that I wanted to do because we went to the funeral. Me and Bruce went to Rick's funeral. And we were blessed to have been invited to it because it was an invite only. And that was quite incredible as well. There was so much love because he was a family man, you see. The stardom bit weren't for him. He didn't really care much for that at all. And I don't think any of them did, to be honest.
No.
Not at all. They don't, not at all. And so Rick's celebration of life, which it was, and it was lovely to see his family. And I knew the family well, and I knew Holly, and I knew... with his son Jason. Jason, it was a ringer for Rick. It's quite incredible when you saw Jason back in the earlier days. Jason looked like Rick did on the back of Sound Effects album. Quite incredible. And Leslie, of course, the lovely Leslie, Rick's wife. She's a lovely lady. She came out to New York when she came out with my wife when. We were on tour in America out there, so we spent all that time. Leslie came out with Kim on the plane, and
I remember Belfast. You played the Limelight. First thing I saw was the backdrop of Rick. Now, obviously, because of the Limelight, you remember it's quite a small venue.
Yeah,
you could only really see
put a bit above his head.
But you know what, Russell, there was so many lovely moments there when, for instance, you were doing your guitar solo and you just looked around and you just looked at that. And for me, I just thought moments like that, that's priceless. You know yourself what that means to yourself, being there and just looking at that, it brings back all these lovely memories and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then when Bruce walked on the stage, I got a lovely shot of Bruce playing, and Rick, it looks like he's just looking straight down at him playing bass. And it was, for me, I was like, you know what, that's made my night.
Yeah.
Because it was just such a lovely shot.
Yeah.
And it was lovely. It was a lovely tribute.
Yeah.
There's been so many beautiful artists out there who have done tributes to him.
Yeah.
And as you said, he was a people's person.
And you see, as much as everybody gets to learn, over the years, people fall out over stuff. And it's not the actual artists or the people that fall out. I'll tell you what it is. What causes it is management companies cause all that fallout. Because if you speak to each and every one of the individuals about, the supposed fallout of the Jam Boys, which really there wasn't really much of a fallout, that was brought about by the media. There wasn't, and when Bruce and Paul embraced in 2009, and then Bruce went and played on Paul's album, and that was lovely to see, and it was lovely for me to be in the studio. I was recording a guitar part when Bruce and Paul were talking, and together, and I was looking at them thinking, wow, it's great, you know, they're chatting away, there's Bruce and Paul in there, you know, and when I come out, I went to Bruce, what were you two gassing about in back there? And I said, I see you talking. He went, I'll tell you in a minute. Right, so he's come over while I'm making a cup of tea in the kitchen. He said, Paul said I reminded him of Brooksy. And I thought, oh, I'll take that, you know, I'll take that. He said, there's something about me that reminded him of Steve Brooks, which I really liked. But it was lovely for me to look through the control room, through the glass, and see them two chatting and having a great conversation. And life's too short for fallouts. And I really do truly believe that if it's left between the artists and the people, there ain't going to be none. What happens is that people get in and cause problems. And what I mean by that, they don't tell the full truths to each other, and they sort of sidle you off, and they say, oh, I'll tell him, don't worry, you leave that to me, I'll do it. And I think that's what happened, because camps divide, you know, that's what happened. I said to Bruce, what happened after the Brighton Centre? He went, oh, it was fucking horrible. He said, we all went off into different camps. Some of the crew, some of the people were split in, some were on Paul's side, some were on my side, some were on Rick's side, you know, and that's how it was. And he said, but it wasn't like that as for the artists, you know, in between. It was because everybody thinks, well, I better jump into whatever lifeboat I think's going to, you know, not sink here, because that's what happens, you know. And that's from my experience in watching it over the years, and that goes for when Rick left us as well, you know.
Let's get straight to it, because there has been a lot of noise around your band at the moment, as you fully well know. Now, it got to the point when I certainly saw Bruce playing where it was a struggle, you know, and he could only come on for certain amounts of time. Obviously, he parted ways. Now, I want to make this clear from what I've seen and from everything you've told me, on good terms, because there's been a lot of comments on social media. As we say, social media can be a blessing and a curse, that you and Bruce have fallen out. Now, whenever I saw you two in a room, it was just like two brothers.
Yep.
You know, you always had a laugh, you're always doing this. So I just want to say, from your point of view, there was never any arguments or anything like that and a split up, was there?
No, I never had an argument with Bruce ever. Not an argument at all. We might have had a mild disagreement over something, you know, very trivial, but no, there was never a fallout between me and Bruce. This is a situation. Bruce's health deteriorated over the last 3 to 4 years, and he was finding each and every show more and more of a struggle. And the management company thought that at the time, you know, it was time for Bruce to sort of retire. That's what we were told, and they said to leave it to them. They would, you know, resolve it by, you know, and do a farewell tour for Bruce. And Bruce was struggling. He really was. And look, you know, I didn't like to see all that. You know, the travelling, the tiredness, the late nights were really, really getting him. And look, you know, I love Bruce. You know, Bruce isn't from the Jam to me. He's a mate of mine. That's what he became. So that's what happened for me. He wasn't this icon in the stars. He was my very close friend and a dear friend of mine that I've had a lot of love with over the years. And it really hurt to see him struggling. So it was thought of that it was that's what they would do. Retire. Bruce would retire from us anyway, certainly from us, because our working schedule can be quite intense. And then surprisingly, they put another band around Bruce, which you know, put a band around him, and then put that band out on the road. But then he can selectively do 2 or 3 shows a month, admittedly. But I know he was struggling in those early days, you know.
Did you know anything about that, or was the
No.
first time you knew about that is when that social media post went out?
The first time I knew about that was when that came out, yeah. Yeah, and that wasn't from Bruce keeping anything from me at all. That was, I would say, again, what I was alluding to, a management, really, and those key elements. Some people think that they have their own decisions about who they're going to tell about what and what they're going to say. So I was in the dark, really. Not that it's any of my business, because it's not my business, but Bruce really wanted to continue on, so I've been told since. And, you know, and good luck to him, you know, and I wish him all the best. I really do, you know, because I knew how much he struggled in those last few years. And it was tough for, you know, that's why we had to have another bass player on the road with us, you know, sadly, that it, you know, it came to that, that he could help Bruce out and through that. But, you know, if Bruce was really, really well at that time, he would have been with us. There was been no reason for him to leave at all. It just got very, very intensely difficult for him.
Because you have got a very busy tour schedule. I mean, I look at it myself and go,
yeah, well, it doesn't. I suppose it doesn't. Does it seem that? I suppose it doesn't seem, considering what I've done for the last sort of 20 odd years.
Oh, you're always doing something. I know
busy.
that.
So I guess we're doing the spring tour, which starts in it starts in the spring, of course. It starts on the 22nd of May at La Belle Angel. Look at that. Well, I said that, in Edinburgh, and then it finishes in Birmingham on the 13th of June, and then we go to Australia for 6 shows, and New Zealand. Come back, and then we've got a winter tour that starts in September, and that's big and up online as well at the moment. So that starts. Blimey, I can't even remember where it starts for that one, but that sort of finishes on the 23rd of December in Brighton, the Concord 2.
Love that venue. Absolutely love that venue.
Yeah.
Seen you in there many a time.
Yep.
And funny story, that's the time I went in there. Miles Kane was playing in there, and he said, I'm going to bring on a special guest, and I thought it'd be Jamie T. And he brung out Paul Weller.
Yeah.
It's off me nut. Yeah. Absolutely off me nut. And I went round the back, tapped on the window. Paul said, come in. Yeah. I saw him, and I was like, all right, well, fuck it. It's good like that. And he went, I think you need to lay off the sauce, he said to me. I remember telling you this before. Yeah. I think you need to lay off that. And I was like, oh, I'll be all right. But then you look back and go, if your hero's telling you to calm down.
Yeah.
But, Bright Concord 2 is beautiful. I've played there a few times with the Brian Jonestown Massacre.
Yeah.
So listen, if you ever need a support act with a little bit of difference, Russell, listen, I know we're friends, but you know.
Yeah, listen, you'll be first I'll be first on the phone to you.
Oh, well.
You know, absolutely. Well, look, you know, we've played Brighton, Concord 2. We used to do that. It used to be everybody's Beano Christmas finish down there. And then we ended up moving on, doing the Brighton Centre, you know, and then doing the Dome and stuff like that. We were lucky enough to do those. And like we put a little bit of tickling of some of the new stuff in. I would call it new stuff, but it's from the last 3 albums. Just a little bit, just for a taste of like Lula, maybe Number 6 and things like that people want to hear. But we don't flood it with that, you know. But we play music from the Jam, you know.
Hence the name of the band.
Hence the name of the band, you know. And you're going to get people out there. It does amaze me about how much hatred there is out online, not just for us, but for not for us at all, because there's been a lot of love out there for us, you know, as well. I always focus on the positive, and to be honest, you know, if they think they're getting to me, I don't really read their comments anyway, because I don't read them. No. You know, I do read all the positive and all the people that follow me, and you know, my own personal account and stuff like that. But you know, my son, he lives in the social media limelight as well, and I say to him, you know, why don't you just ban them? Just get rid of them, you know, because, you know, you don't need people like that in your life,
do you? Don't need that negativity in your life.
No, negativity.
Everyone gets it. I mean, I see it. For instance, Paul could do...
Paul cops it as well.
But why didn't he play this Jam song? Why didn't he play that? He's only played 3 Jam songs, and I'm thinking, what? Yeah. Oasis, for instance, the set list come out. Why ain't this on there? Why ain't that on there? And you think no one can win this day and age, you know?
Yeah. Well, you can't. That's just it. You actually can't. And I think it's quite dangerous to give somebody a few buttons to push when they've got at home having a drink. Because that's when people get, you know, fired up, isn't it?
I had this discussion so many times. I always cop it, Russell, because people think, you know, with my haircut. I mean, listen, I put myself out there, and I'm big enough and ugly enough to take it. It doesn't bother me. But then you get some where you just think you've gone literally out of your way. Do you know what I mean? To try and destroy me. Yeah. But I guarantee you would never say anything. Here's a good example, actually, thinking about it. I'll tell you this story. Belfast, me and the wife went out, funny enough, to watch Liam Gallagher was playing Boucher Road. And people come up to me because they love what I do. Probably similar to yourself, Russell. You get people coming up, they want to chat, they want a photo, and it is a beautiful moment. And I find myself so lucky and fortunate that people want a fucking photo with me. I am like, you sure you want a photo with me? Yeah, I love your magic and that, and it's beautiful. Now, this woman come up to me, and she went, "All right, Liam, can I have a photo with you?" Right. To my reply straight away, "Only if I can have a photo with you, because I love the Addams Family." Right. Yeah. People were pissing themselves, right? Even
Great.
she laughed. Right. Yeah. She laughed.
Yeah, like that.
That night I got home, and there was a few photos that I retweeted on Twitter of me and these lads and a few people I met on my travels up at the gig. And underneath one of the photos was this guy saying he's one of the most arrogant cunts I've ever met in my life. He's lucky I didn't knock his fucking head off, right? I'm thinking, what?
Yeah.
I'm thinking cocaine's hell of a drug, I know, but what is going on here? So, sorry, mate, what happened? My wife wanted a photo with you, and you said she looked like something from the Addams Family. I said, let me just put the brakes on there a minute, mate. Your wife come up to me and said, "All right, Liam."
Yeah.
My name's not Liam. People know I'm not Liam. So she was trying to be funny by saying, "Oh, no, but you're here." And he goes, "You're lucky you weren't nowhere near us." And I went, again, hold on. And then my wife, obviously being from Belfast, she's fiery as fuck, right? Yeah. She's had to come off Twitter. But she replied saying, "We were literally stood probably 2 to 3 foot in front of you for the whole gig, and no one said anything." Which then leads me to what I always say: people will never say anything to your face, but on social media, where they've got that barrier, they will say whatever they want.
Yeah, I mean, the world is at a loss as to what to do about it. I suppose you don't do anything; you just don't let it enter your life. And like you said, easy at the beginning of this today, you said to me, "I'm either busy or I'm on my boat." Well, the reason I get on my boat is because unless you can fucking swim, you ain't gonna find me, And I've been into boats all my life, and I love the water. I live on the beach down in Bognor, and I'm very lucky to be there. And I like to get away. When I feel like I get away, I feel like I really just get away. Anywhere. And the serenity that I get, because it's part, I need that in my life. I need that quiet time, and I need, I get a lot of reality checks at home, which is great. We all need a reality check. I've loved it in the last few months. I've not been busy. I've been, really just enjoying being
being Russell.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that, I do
family
like
man.
That. Yeah, family man. Family
that is
man.
what it's all about. End of the day, and as I said to you at the beginning before we pressed record, I've found myself, I'm a family man now, and I found my reason for living, if that makes sense, because I was always thinking, well, what am I doing with my life? I'm just doing this, I'm doing that, but like, what am I here for? And I found my purpose.
It's great, it's one, I'm really privileged that you invited me up today, and it's great that you also share the story of being sober and clean. It's not everybody, we don't ram it down anyone's throat, but anybody out there that struggles, it can be done. So you and me are a testament to that.
100%. We're living proof that it can be done.
But at the bottom line, I'm a family man too. I brought my kids up. I had to, I went to work. I come home at 4, 5, 6 in the morning. I work really, really hard. I try to be nice to everybody. And the ones that I don't like, I don't go fucking near them. So I try to be nice to everybody and do to people as I would like to be done to myself in life. And, I've got no hatred towards people out there at all. I've got a lot of love. There's been so much, let's talk about the positive stuff there. There's been so much love and kindness over the last 20 odd years about doing what I do, my part in that anyway, certainly my part in it. And look, I've got to talk about the other members of the band, Mikey, Andy and Gary. It's great musicians that I play with. They're really phenomenal people and great musicians.
Funny fuckers as well every time I see it.
Yeah. They told me all about those magic tricks you were doing with them. It's great to be surrounded by lovely people. And, you talked about Alan McGee, earlier on, another one of those life's gems, that, and that was a great, interesting story because he brought Wilco Johnson down to the studio to play on a track that we done on an album. And he brought him down and I didn't recognise Alan. you know, because I hadn't seen him for years. And then we just ended up talking that, fun enough, that he was a sober one of us too. And clean and sober gang. Friend of Bill's, mate of Bill's, yeah. Bill W's. And he just stood up, gave me a great big hug, and we've been close ever since. And he's just a smashing nice fella.
He is. He really is. And again, I tell you what, this is similar to your moment of standing on stage next to Rick and Bruce. I got asked to do an evening with Alan McGee. Yeah. And, you know, I got to sit on a stage and listen to stories about how he met a band that I love.
Yeah.
You know, how he first met Noel, how he first met Lynn. And I'm sitting there going, this is fucking mental, right? And I did 3 nights in a row with him at Water Rats. We did, here's one for you quickly. We did Cardiff, and he managed a band called Super Furry Animals.
That's right. Yeah.
And the drummer was in the crowd. And at the end, they come up to Alan and said, we're going to go off. And they said to me, what do you want to do, mate? Do you want to come back to our studio? We've got a little studio and have a few drinks and that. And I went, oh, yeah, go on then. And Alan looked at me and he said, they're going to get you fucked up like that, right? I was like, don't worry about that. I'll be fine. Ended up missing my train the next day from Cardiff back down to Gatwick, didn't I? Complete write-off, mate. I was gone. Don't remember what day of the week it was. I was in the recording studio phoning up Nadine at like 4 or 5 in the morning going, listen to this mix. Putting the phone to the fucking mental stories. But, you know, there's stories we've got. And
there's loads. We're very lucky because, you know, talk about my own environment, been around Bruce and Rick and all those other lovely. But I've met a lot of really nice people as well over the years. You know, not just those icons, but, you know, a lot of other people. Doors open for certain things, and, you know, just meeting lovely people, because there's nothing better than walking away and you think, yeah, I really like that. You know, I really liked been in their company. They're really nice. They were so
surround yourself by positive people.
Exactly. You know, there's so much negativity. The world's bonkers at the moment, man. You know, I haven't got. You know, usually can put something to rights. You know, the world of rights, but fuck,
know where to start at the moment.
Clue where to start at the moment. And you know, and I was watching this Beatles documentary the other night. I watched the documentary, the new one, and then I'm watching the McCartney one, and then thinking how wonderful. No wonder he went to the Mull of Kintyre. I get it. I really get it. You know, why he went there, and he was just up there in the cottage, you know, with Linda and the kids, and think, yeah, fucking hell, I'll have some of that.
Have some of that.
You know, loving it all day long, and then just come into the chaos when you want, and then go out.
Whenever
but
you
when
want.
I come into London today, I've suddenly, since, you know, it's no secret, I had a heart attack about 4 years ago, and I've developed a bit of claustrophobia since then.
London will help you with that, would it, eh?
I got on the fucking train and it was all going swimmingly well until we got to like East Croydon.
Yeah.
And then everybody bundled on it. And now I'm thinking,
everyone for themselves there, mate.
Yeah.
When they're running on the train.
That, isn't it?
Yeah, oh, why, mate?
Everybody's 100%. For themselves. And then I was just glad I jumped in a cab and came up to here in a taxi, and I thought, I can't be doing without underground and all that, you know.
Fuck that,
I feel like a mole under there, you know.
Mate, 100%. But do you know what, Russell? I have really enjoyed sitting down with you today and chatting, mate, because, as I said, we could chat for hours.
Yeah.
We really could, mate, but we want to make sure people don't fall asleep.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Bore them to death. No, yeah, sure.
So listen, honestly, I'm looking forward to seeing you on the stage again with the boys. Keep doing what you're doing, and thank you for coming down today, mate.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, Ben. Nice
Absolute
one,
pleasure.
Mate.
Thank you so much.
Nice one.
Thank you, mate.